Rejoice, O Isaiah, our virgin is with child, and shall bear a son, Emmanuel. He is both God and man, and Orient is his name. Magnifying him we call the Virgin blessed.
Well, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you must be a very sick lot to have come here to hear something about canon law. I am really humbled to be asked to be here to address you. I am certainly not the best priest in the world, and I am certainly not the best scholar in the world, but I will attempt to make a presentation that will be adequate and will provide you some basic information. As an introduction to my thoughts regarding marriage in Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism, I would like to offer a preliminary reflection on the historic times in which we live. If someone were to ask me, what major challenge remains to the restoration of communion between the sees of the Christian East and West, I would say that on one level it is the issue and definition of universal primacy and the place of the protos, or first among the many, in the hierarchical ordering of the Church. However, on a deeper level, I would say that the restoration of communion is not only vertical, but also horizontal. Without the recognition of ourselves in each other, without my acceptance as a priest of other priests, of laity, of other laity, of monks and nuns, of their brothers and sisters in East and West, no restoration of communion will be possible, since it will not live in true ecclesial reality. In the words of the Irish novelist and poetic realist Colum McCann, when describing the troubles of Northern Ireland, quote, "It is, of course, naive to expect total reconciliation. Some grievances are so deep that the people who suffered them will never be satisfied. But the point is not satisfaction. The point is that the present is superior to the past, and it has to be cultivated as such." Now to the matter at hand, our discussion of marriage. The subject of Orthodox and Roman Catholic marriage has a personal significance for me. The marriage of my parents was celebrated at St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church in Astoria, Long Island, New York, on September 9th, 1951, by Father Demetrius Frangos. Interestingly enough, the middle names recorded on the certificate of matrimony for my parents were the first names of my grandparents. So my father's name became Sebastian Pasquale Viscuso, and my mother's Georgia Anastasio Aliferi. I also note several other interesting documents. A 1951 membership card for the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of North and South America, noted with a payment of $10 and signed by Archbishop Michael in the name of both my parents, which must have preceded the wedding, also accompanied by a receipt for dues payments of $10 to the Archdiocese and $8 church dues by my father. And a 1959 membership card issued only in the name of my father for St. Spiritan Parish in New York City, and signed by Bishop Germanos Polyzoidis, the locum tenens, just after the death of Archbishop Michael, prior to the election of Archbishop Jacobus. The latter membership card notes that my Roman Catholic father, who had undergone no chrismation, much less a baptism ritual in the Orthodox Church, quote, is in good standing with the above community and the Greek Archdiocese of North and South America, subject to their constitution and bylaws. I will also share with you several salient points regarding my parents. In the first place, a story that my mother enjoyed telling is that my father gave his word of honor to my Greek grandmother prior to the wedding for all children to be raised in the Greek Orthodox Church. He was certainly a man of his word, and in fact was largely responsible for my religious upbringing. My oldest memories of liturgy and church are associated with my father, who fulfilled his word of honor and took the primary responsibility for bringing his children to the Orthodox Church. Throughout my entire upbringing, it never occurred to me that in fact my father belonged to a different church altogether. And I suppose my mother simply expressed this point when years later I asked what she thought about when marrying a Roman Catholic. Her answer was simple and meaningful. Both of us never saw the difference in our churches. Beyond the conditions for my Greek grandmother's blessings, I learned that one of the reasons for my parents' marriage in the Greek Orthodox Church was the fact that when they explored the possibilities with a Roman Catholic priest, he had insisted on my mother's conversion prior to the celebration of the wedding. Such a thing had seemed ludicrous to them, since from their perspective, there were no differences in their beliefs about religion. What was there to convert to? Asked my mother. No such requirement was made by the Greek Orthodox priest, who, as you have already heard, happily issued the appropriate membership cards to both and enrolled them in the parish under my father's name, repeated 8 years later after my own and my brother's birth and baptism. The theologians no doubt caught up with my parents some years later when the Orthodox Roman Catholic North American Theological Consultation issued its agreed statement on mixed marriage twice, on May 20th, 1970, and in revised form on November 4th, 1971. Agreed statement on the sanctity of marriage on December 8th, 1978. And joint recommendations on the spiritual formation of children on marriage between Orthodox and Roman Catholics on October 11th, 1980, to which may be added an agreement concluded between the former Cardinal Medeiros and Bishop Anthimos of Boston on ways of regularizing non-canonical marriages between an Orthodox and Roman Catholic spouse on April 8th, 1981, and the reaction to the Anthimos Medeiros agreement, issued by the Orthodox Roman Catholic North American Theological Consultation on May 29th, 1982, coincidentally the anniversary date for the fall of Constantinople. Also may be added an agreed statement on Orthodox Roman Catholic marriage of the Metropolitan New York, New Jersey Orthodox Roman Catholic Dialogue with a detailed appendix on canonical procedures and a pastoral statement on Orthodox Roman Catholic marriages issued on October 5th, 1990 by the Joint Committee of the Orthodox and Roman Catholic Bishops, which was formed at the suggestion of Archbishop Iakovos in 1981 to address common pastoral concerns, marriage being described as foremost among these. There also incidentally exists an interesting Roman Catholic document entitled "When a Catholic Marries an Orthodox Christian," which is part of the Walking Together series and was developed by the Committee on Ecumenical Interreligious Affairs of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops in 2008. Although being described as a foremost pastoral concern, little has been done to take common actions based on such agreed statements, and if nothing else, certain problems continue to be affirmed. On the other hand, they do reflect significant changes in attitudes towards orthodoxy and mixed marriages, particularly on the part of Roman Catholicism. In 1951, the Roman Catholic Church considered my father's union with my mother as one contracted outside of the church and would have described this as contrary to the laws of God and man, illicit and invalid. From September 9th of that year, my father would have been unable to receive the sacraments, subject to excommunication ipso facto. His family life would have been regarded as a failure, since he had neglected to baptize and bring up his children as Roman Catholics. As Canon 2319 of the Roman Catholic 1917 Code states, they are subject to excommunication latae sententiae, who contract marriage before a non-Catholic minister, contract marriage with the implied or express agreement that all or some of the children shall be educated outside the Catholic Church, knowingly dare to offer their children to non-Catholic ministers for baptism, knowingly offer children to be educated or brought up in a non-Catholic denomination. In order to marry my mother, a non-Catholic, schismatic, a dissident Oriental in the Roman Catholic Church, my father would have needed a dispensation for just and serious reasons. My mother, in turn, would have had to guarantee not to endanger his faith and that any children would be raised in Roman Catholicism. Similar conditions at that time existed within the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of North and South America, which was and still is under the jurisdiction of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, with its Archbishop as Exarch, although significantly changed and reorganized with a new charter. On what basis was my mother permitted to marry a Roman Catholic in an Orthodox church in 1951? In general, consistent with Canon 72 of the Council in Trullo, which we heard about this morning, that took place from 691 to 692 and is regarded as an ecumenical council's legislation within the Orthodox Church, such mixed marriages were considered prohibited. And I'll present my translation of the canon. An Orthodox man is not permitted to be joined with a heretical woman, nor indeed an Orthodox woman to be united with a heretical man. But if any such thing appears to have been done by anyone, the marriage is considered null, and the illicit cohabitation is dissolved. For the unmixable should not be mixed, nor a wolf joined with a sheep, nor the lot of sinners with the portion of Christ. However, if anyone would transgress the things decreed, let him be excommunicated. In a canonical reference work copied more often than the Gospels in Byzantine monasteries of the 14th century, the alphabetical collection of all subjects that are contained in the sacred and divine canons, an encyclopedia which summarized the legislative tradition and practice of the Church, the hieromonk Matthew Vlastaris writes in 1335, when commenting on Trullo 72 and also Canon 14 of the Fourth Ecumenical Council that forbade the marriage of clergy with heretical women, I call heretics those who receive our mystery, but who are mistaken in some things, on account of which they are at variance with the Orthodox. The Council states that if perhaps the heretic or the unbeliever promises to observe the Orthodox faith, let the contract proceed. However, let the union be delayed until works would confirm the substance of his promise. Latins who choose to marry Orthodox women are also required to do these things. For if, according to the civil law, marriage is defined as a sharing and consortium of both divine and human law, how would they that differ concerning greater things regarding the disposition of the soul come together with one another while thinking contradictory things concerning the faith? On account of this, even after the dissolution of the illicit marriage, it is deemed right that the transgressors also be excommunicated. With the passage of time, mixed marriages became the subject of additional legislation by the Ecumenical Patriarchate. In the 19th century, its canonical practice was exemplified by the following decision taken from the Acts of the Holy Synod of Constantinople on July 31st, 1881. And highlighted as an example to be followed. In a well-known reference book of the period by Michael Theotokos, Legislation of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, published in 1897 with the permission of the Holy and Great Church of Christ. On the question of mixed marriage, it was agreed to write to the petitioning metropolitan that he might handle matters as his pastoral discretion dictates, for the good always of the church, and to indicate two means of economy: the reception by holy chrism of those from another denomination who approach for the conclusion of marriage with Orthodox, or at least their promise given in an official, obligatory, written form that they will baptize their children according to Orthodox doctrine. The current guidance for Orthodox clergy in the United States is based generally on the Guidelines for Orthodox Christians and Ecumenical Relations, published in 1973 by the former Standing Conference of Canonical Orthodox Bishops in the Americas, dissolved in 2010 by the Assembly of Orthodox Canonical Bishops of North and Central America, which states, Holy Communion will not be sought by Orthodox Christians outside of the Church, nor will it be offered to those who do not yet confess the Orthodox Church as their mother. Normally, the sacrament of marriage in the Orthodox Church takes place only between members of that church. By application of the principle of economia, the Orthodox sacrament of marriage between an Orthodox and a Christian baptized in the name of the Holy Trinity may be performed. The Orthodox sacrament is not permitted in the case of two non-Orthodox Christians, or in the case of an Orthodox and an unbaptized person. Pastors should respect the conscience of both parties in their plans for the religious rearing of their children. No prior agreement which would exclude the possibility of raising the children in the Orthodox faith should be entered into by the Orthodox party. Every reasonable effort should be made to raise the children as Orthodox Christians. What were the reasons given for the Byzantine Church refusing marriage to non-Orthodox? Marriages are prohibited with heretics who include all non-Orthodox that, quote, receive our mystery, meaning baptism, but are mistaken in some things, on account of which they are at variance with the Orthodox, unquote. Without their promise to observe the Orthodox faith and entrance into the Orthodox Church, particularly applied to Latins or Roman Catholics, quote, the unmixable should not be mixed, nor a wolf joined with a sheep, nor the lot of a sinner with the portion of Christ, unquote. The key point focused on the lack of marital unity. Quote, for if according to the civil law, marriage is defined as a sharing and a consortium of both divine and human law, how would they that differ concerning greater matters regarding the disposition of the soul come together with one another while thinking contradictory things concerning the faith, unquote. In analyzing the 19th century practice of the Patriarchate and the Scopa guidance, both are applications of economia or economy. Put simply, an adaptation by the hierarchy of the canons to the circumstances with the benefit of the Church in mind. The 19th century Patriarchate prescribed that prior to marriage, reception occur by holy chrism, or at least that the non-Orthodox party formally promised to raise the children in the faith. Consistent with these prescriptions, in 1951, my father was welcome to marry my mother at St. Demetrius without any requirement to convert, although I can find no record that any promise was given in writing regarding the baptism of the children. The Scopa guidelines allow mixed marriage with Christians baptized in the name of the Holy Trinity and make no recommendation for chrismation. Regarding children, the guidelines requires as a condition that no agreement between the spouses is made before the union that would preclude the Orthodox spouse from raising the children in the Orthodox faith, rather than an obligatory promise for their Orthodox upbringing. The question arises, if the Orthodox Church recognizes the baptism in the name of the Holy Trinity of the non-Orthodox bride or bridegroom in order to marry them, why not allow them to receive the Eucharist? The Constantinopolitan Synod first recommended application of economy, not administering baptism prior to the marriage but only chrismation, addresses this problem by its consistency with the classic Byzantine definition of a heretic as one that receives our mystery, i.e. the one baptism. The second recommendation, the Church accepting a promise to raise children within the Church, is a more radical application of economy because it appears to apply that other mysteries or sacraments may also be received. In summary, baptism is presupposed before receiving any mysteries within the Orthodox Church. When economy is applied for the present canonical practice of performing mixed marriages, a person baptized in the name of the Holy Trinity appears to be recognized as a Christian capable of receiving sacramental grace under circumstances that the Church determines will benefit her life. This practice of celebrating mixed marriage exists side by side with the present reception of Roman Catholic converts through chrismation, as well as the debarment of non-Orthodox from other Orthodox sacraments. The present administration of an Orthodox sacrament to those outside of Orthodoxy appears to be a use of ecclesiastical economy made with the good of the Church and the salvation of souls in view, but inconsistent with the restriction of these baptized Christians from other mysteries. Consequently, under these circumstances, as a young boy, it never occurred to me that my father belonged to a different church. His faithful attendance of the Divine Liturgy, while not receiving communion, was in fact typical of the rest of the congregation. During the era of the 1950s up through the 1980s in the United States, many Greek Orthodox limited themselves to the reception of communion a few times a year, based on a variety of factors, including a profound respect for the Eucharist and perhaps an overemphasis on the need for purity. In fact, my father, when attending the liturgy and not receiving from the chalice, was often mistaken by visiting priests as an old-time believer from the heart of Greece, with his swarthy Sicilian complexion, black hair, and dark eyes. In this respect, there is an old expression regarding Italians and Greeks: una faccia, una razza. One face, one race. As I said before, perhaps the two churches in the United States caught up to my parents' approach to their marriage through their agreed statements from 1970 to 1990. Several themes readily become apparent in reviewing the various common declarations of the Orthodox Roman Catholic consultation, the report of the New York, New Jersey Dialogue, the Bishop Anthimos Cardinal Madeiras Agreement, and the pastoral statement of the Joint Committee of Orthodox and Roman Catholic Bishops. Throughout the documents, both churches are in absolute agreement on one point: that mixed marriages are to be discouraged. A variety of reasons are provided, most of which appear to call to mind the sentiment expressed by the medieval canonist Vlastaris, who bases his objection on the lack of marital unity produced by differences in matters of faith. Such agreement by Catholicism and Orthodoxy on this point calls to mind the wonderful words of the psalmist: "Behold, what is so good and what is so delightful than for brothers to be of the same mind." That's meant to be a little satirical. Nevertheless, the New York, New Jersey Dialogue's statement appears to acknowledge, contrary to such common affirmations on the drawbacks of mixed marriages, which are incidentally the majority of marriages taking place in the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, quote, without denying, this is a really an amazing quote, without denying the existence of certain dogmatic differences which in fact do impede full sacramental and canonical communion between the two churches, it is clear that certain of these dogmatic differences, real as they are, between Orthodox Christians and Roman Catholics, do not have a major influence on the everyday Christian lives of our people. Please. In addition, all the documents contain an affirmation of the sacramental nature of marriage shared between Roman Catholicism and Orthodoxy, based on the concepts and images of spousal love drawn from Old and New Testament. The authentic love of a man and a woman in marriage reflects the compassionate love of God for his people, imaging his fidelity in the relationship between Christ and the church. Allusion is often made to the procreative aspect of marriage as an expression of the spousal love for the world, although often qualified, since the Orthodox canonical definition of marriage, quote, marriage is a union of a man and a woman, a consortium for an entire lifetime, a sharing of divine and human law, either through a blessing, crowning, or contract, unquote, does not address the purpose of marriage, which is not settled and probably a matter of theologumena or theological opinion rather than mandatory belief. Opinions are viewed as diverse among the fathers and include procreation, assisting in mutual salvation, the confinement of sexual energy for the avoidance of fornication, and so forth. An affirmation of the common understanding of both churches is frequently included regarding the necessity of consent and blessing imparted through the church's ministry to establish the marriage, with an acknowledgement of the difference in the ways this ministry is exercised in order to fulfill the theological and canonical norms for marriage in Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism, such as in the 1990 pastoral statement of the Orthodox and Catholic bishops. This is an interesting quote. The Orthodox Church, as a rule, accepts as sacramental only those marriages of Christians baptized in the name of the Holy Trinity, which are sanctified in the Church's liturgy through the blessing of an Orthodox bishop or priest. The Catholic Church accepts as sacramental those marriages of Christians baptized in the name of the Holy Trinity, which are witnessed by a Catholic bishop or priest, or in more recent discipline, a deacon. But it also envisages some exceptional cases in which, whether by law or by dispensation, Catholics may enter into a sacramental marriage in the absence of a bishop, priest, or deacon. There are also differences in our theological explanations of this diversity, as older presentations of sacramental theology indicate. Orthodox theologians often have insisted that the priest is the proper minister of the sacrament, whereas Roman Catholic theologians more often have spoken of the couple as ministering the sacrament to each other. Consequently, the recommendations have been made in the documents that the Catholic Church, as a normative practice, allows the Catholic party of the proposed marriage with an Orthodox to be married with an Orthodox priest officiating, after consultation by the partners with their pastors, in order to allow the Orthodox spouse continued participation in the sacramental life of his or her church. In a very pragmatic approach, the 1981 agreement concluded between the former Cardinal Medeiros and Bishop Anthimos of Boston sought to regularize the canonical position of the Orthodox spouse who had been married according to the rites of the Roman Catholic Church through a blessing of the marriage by the Orthodox Church, especially in the case of those long married, thus restoring the Orthodox partner to full communion with his or her church. This resulted in a reaction, or rather, theological controversy, as the case might be characterized among the Orthodox, based on a difference between the ecumenical patriarchate's canonical practice, according to which marriage, which had previously taken place outside the communion of the Orthodox Church, is not recognized as a sacramental marriage, inasmuch as it accepts as sacramental only those marriages sanctified in the liturgical life of the Church by being blessed by an Orthodox priest, and that of the Orthodox Church in America, which was willing to accept such marriages as sacramental, but requires the sacrament of penance prior to restoration to communion for disregarding the discipline of the Church. On the Roman Catholic side, there was an overriding concern that this practice might be interpreted as suggesting an inadequacy of the Roman Catholic celebration and a general preference for the Orthodox celebration. The view was emphasized that any form of regularization should avoid giving the impression that the marriage which has taken place in the Roman Catholic Church does not have a fundamental sacramental character. as stated by the Orthodox Catholic Theological Consultation in 1982. Quote, "Nor should it imply that a new ceremony is taking place. The goal is to reintegrate the Orthodox communicant into the full life of his/her own church and to restore him/her to full canonical standing within the church." Unquote. On the other hand, was not the only means generally acceptable for reintegrating the Orthodox communicant the performance of a new ceremony, the very thing that was being objected to? Finally, one of the most striking points made in the various documents is the emphasis placed on the spiritual formation of children. There are acknowledgments that each church is insisting that the children of such marriages be raised within its own community on grounds of the child's welfare, although always with the presumption that one of the parents will relinquish the chief responsibility to the other, a point that seems antithetical to marital union to begin with. Perhaps the 1990 statement of the Orthodox and Roman Catholic bishops points in a better direction by emphasizing that the decision should rest with the husband and the wife. Quote, "and should take into account the good of the children, the strength of the religious conviction of the parents and other relatives, the demands of their consciences, the unity and stability of the family, and other aspects of specific context." Unquote. Their recommendation is based upon, quote, "the proximity of doctrine and practice of our church, which enables each to see the other precisely as church, as the locus for the communion of men and women with God and with each other through Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit." Unquote. Explicit rejection is made of raising some children in one religion and some in the other, and also of neglecting the baptizing and catechizing of children on the grounds that they can decide for themselves when they are older. The one is rejected on the grounds of dividing the family and leading to an attitude of indifference, while the other is thought to result in a weak and confused faith and spiritual life. Operating from the same framework of thought, the Orthodox Catholic Consultation recommended in 1986 the elimination of the formal promises to baptize and educate the children to a particular church as an absolute requirement for Orthodox Roman Catholic marriages, a point already set in operation, at least among the Orthodox in the United States, through the Scoper Guidelines of 1973. There are important points that are not addressed in sufficient depth through these common statements and agreements, certain of which may be considered church-dividing issues by some. Chief among these is the issue of divorce and annulment. Although mentioned and referenced, much work appears necessary in dealing with the diverse teaching of Roman Catholicism and Orthodoxy on remarriage. The prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith and a member of the Congregation for the Oriental Churches, Archbishop Gerhard Ludwig Müller, recently wrote in L'Osservatore Romano, "In the Orthodox churches today, there are a great many grounds for divorce, which are mostly justified in terms of economia or pastoral leniency in difficult individual cases, and they open the path to a second or third marriage marked by a penitential character. This practice cannot be reconciled with God's will, as expressed unambiguously in Jesus' sayings about the indissolubility of marriage. But it represents an ecumenical problem that is not to be underestimated. In the West, the Gregorian reform countered these liberalizing tendencies and gave fresh impetus to the original understanding of Scripture and the Fathers. The Catholic Church defended the absolute indissolubility of marriage, even at the cost of great sacrifice and suffering. The schism of a Church of England detached from the successor of Peter came about not because of doctrinal differences, but because the Pope, out of obedience to the sayings of Jesus, could not accommodate the demands of King Henry VIII for the dissolution of his marriage. I can safely predict that if the thoughts expressed in this statement underlie Roman Catholic approaches to Orthodox canonical practice and theology regarding divorce and remarriage, future union between the sister churches will be far from assured. Such thoughts are filled with misconceptions and historical misunderstandings, the least of which is to associate Tudor England with the world of the Eastern Roman Empire, as well as the 6th century legislation of Justinian the Great, which was accepted by the Church, repeated in its own ecclesiastical legislation, and provides the basis for its canonical practice regarding divorce. Divorce and remarriage within the Church predate the 11th century and have nothing to do with a liberalizing tendency. Certainly, the agreed statements contain affirmations that the marital bond is indissoluble. Nevertheless, there are exceptions to this norm grounded in a pastoral recognition of the factors of frailty and error that too often characterize human life and that result in the spiritual death of a marriage. To be sure, although the Orthodox Church teaches that marriage may not be dissolved, this does not mean that such a tragedy does not occur. The grounds for ecclesiastical divorce are viewed as instances in which the Church bestows the mercy of God, dissolving marriages, or rather recognizing those whose spiritual foundation has already been destroyed through human frailty and whose continuance in name alone would result in the moral and spiritual harm of the former spouses. As His Eminence Metropolitan Calixtus Vera summarizes, since Christ, according to the Matthean account, allowed an exception to His general ruling about the indissolubility of marriage, the Orthodox Church also is willing to allow an exception. Some suggestion has been made in certain Roman Catholic and Orthodox circles that the absence of the Eucharist and crowning during the late Byzantine celebration of second and third marriages in some way implies that Orthodoxy regarded or still regards these unions as less than sacramental in some way. Such views are founded on errors in scholarship and consequent misunderstandings. Based on a review of canonical sources during the late Byzantine period, several points need to be made. There was no uniform practice regarding crowning of second and third marriages. In fact, second unions were definitely crowned according to the usage of the Great Church. The presence or absence of crowning did not mean that a sacerdotal blessing of the marriage did not take place. And since the Eucharist was not a constitutive element in the establishment of marriage, the canonical restriction of the second and third married from the Eucharist during a period of penance did not mean that the union, as established by sacerdotal blessing, was not regarded as sacramental and incapable of sanctification. The absence of the Eucharist in general from the marriage service is completely irrelevant to the question of its sacramental nature. Orthodox marriages today are blessed without the reception of the Eucharist during their celebration, just as much as so-called mixed marriages of Roman Catholics and Orthodox are sacramental. Both receive God's blessing through the ministry of the Church. In late Byzantine canonical practice, the eventual reception of the Eucharist after a period of penance, at least in the case of the second married, reflected the good standing of the couple and the status of their union as being equivalent in every way to the first married. This penance was based, at least in the canonical text, on a viewpoint that associated the formation of a second marriage primarily with the desire to continue active sexuality, a regretful inability to be satisfied with the memory of the first spouse, and consequently an alternative better than burning. Given this context, canonical texts view third marriage as little better than moderated fornication, and after a period of penance lasting 4 to 5 years, restrict the communion of these spouses to 3 times annually after major fasting periods that are associated with abstinence from nuptial relations. In different jurisdictions within the United States, and even from parish to parish, practices differ on the use of crowning and the penitential service for those who are married a second time, which incidentally does double duty for third marriages. with the demise of the penitential system that was presupposed by the formal corpus of Orthodox canonical legislation, it appears inconsistent to use a penitential service without penance. Without penance, namely exclusion from the Eucharist for a period of up to 2 years, the nature of second marriage as a concession appears lost. Moreover, the viewpoint underlining the ancient ecclesiastical legislation involved appears to assume that the purpose of marriage in general is sexual gratification. This view is questionable. The fact that crowning was and is also performed for second marriages appears to reflect another perspective and in fact the need for a different canonical practice. Do we really associate remarriage with the pollution of the body and servitude to sexual desire? If so, then perhaps the late Byzantine canonical discipline is relevant. What does the Church wish to teach? That remarriage is a source of pollution that renders one ritually defiled and unable to receive the pure and the sacred? Other associated issues with remarriage to be examined by Orthodox and Roman Catholicism include how Orthodox previously married and divorced and in good canonical standing within their church are to be treated when marrying a Roman Catholic. Cases certainly exist where there is an insistence that the Orthodox party undergoes a formal Roman Catholic annulment process, even when the remarriage is being celebrated in the Orthodox Church, as if the decision of the Orthodox hierarch, who grants all ecclesiastical divorces, as well as permissions for marriage, was of no significance. Another issue, also absent in agreed statements, but currently under study by the Orthodox Catholic consultation, concerns the relationship between holy orders and marriage. Perhaps Pope Francis has the best insights that can be shared on this issue based on a question posed by journalists during his recent flight back from the Holy Land to Rome. Question from the German language group. Thank you, Your Holiness. During your pilgrimage, you spoke at length with Patriarch Bartholomew and met with him several times. We are wondering if you spoke about concrete steps forward, and if there was an occasion to speak also about this. I'm also wondering if the Catholic Church could not learn something from the Orthodox churches. I'm referring to married priests, the question that preoccupies a lot of Catholics in Germany, the Holy Father. But the Catholic Church has married priests, no? The Greek Catholics, the Coptic Catholics, no? There are married priests in the Eastern Rite, because celibacy is not a dogma of faith. It is a rule of life that I appreciate very much and believe is a gift for the Church. It is not a dogma of faith. There is always an open door. We did not speak about this as a program, at least for now. We have more important things to undertake. With Bartholomew, this subject was not touched upon because it is secondary, truly, in our relations with the Orthodox. We spoke about unity, but unity is made along the way. Unity is a journey. We can never achieve unity at a theological conference. The Orthodox Roman Catholic consultation recently issued a statement calling for the, quote, lifting of the restrictions regarding the ordination of married men to the priesthood in the Eastern Catholic churches of North America. In particular, emphasizing, quote, the importance of preserving the legitimate traditions of the Eastern churches, unquote, and referring to the decree Orientale Lumen XVIII on this point. As the decree Presbyterorum Ordinis of the Second Vatican Council states, quote, this Holy Synod, while it commends ecclesiastical celibacy, in no way intends to alter that different discipline which legitimately flourishes in the Eastern churches. It permanently exhorts all those who have received the priesthood of marriage to persevere in their holy vocation, unquote. Nevertheless, as the consultation adds, quote, until recently, very few married Eastern Catholic men have been allowed to be ordained to the priesthood in North America, unquote. A final unaddressed point is contained in an interesting Roman Catholic document entitled, When a Catholic Marries an Orthodox Christian. which, as I've said, is part of the Walking Together series and was developed by the Committee on Ecumenical and Interreligious Affairs of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops in 2008. The document, which purports to be pastoral in nature, to be distributed to Orthodox and Roman Catholic mixed couples contemplating marriage, and refers to the agreed statements of the consultation and other common expressions which we have reviewed. Nevertheless, a point is raised in the following pastoral guidance under the heading, quote, "How can we live our Christian faith together in a Catholic Orthodox marriage?" Unquote. This is what it says. When a Catholic and an Orthodox Christian are joined in matrimony, they will have many opportunities to illustrate through their married life the spiritual and theological closeness of our two churches. Under some circumstances, this may include sharing in the Eucharist, but the two churches have different views on this question. The Catholic Church offers to the Orthodox Christians the sacraments of penance, the Eucharist, and the anointing of the sick when they ask for them of their own free will and are properly disposed. But Orthodox pastors instruct their faithful not to receive communion in a Catholic church. Both churches have the conviction that only those united in the same faith can share the Eucharist. For the Orthodox, this implies that the Eucharist can be shared only with the Orthodox. For Catholics, the level of unity in faith that already exists with the Orthodox allows such sharing to take place. Consequently, a couple's desire to share the Eucharist, just as they will share the sacrament of marriage, touches on different points of view and practices that are not easily harmonized. I am really not sure what sort of marital unity is being suggested by this guidance. Receive our Eucharist, penance, and anointing, even though your pastors tell you otherwise to receive only their Eucharist, penance, and anointing. My Christ versus your Christ. Truly a sad commentary and a shame on both churches. According to this advice to married couples, what is the purpose of receiving these sacraments? And I'm speaking to both churches, not just the Roman Catholic Church. Is there not a danger of the deeper meaning somehow being lost of receiving communion? In this guidance, are the mysteries or sacraments presented as integral parts of a life within a church? Or rather, is there not a strong possibility that they will just become sacred objects, almost commodities, being offered more freely by one church as if to some advantage over a competitor? I would like to repeat again what was said at the beginning of my paper, that the restoration of communion is not only vertical, but also horizontal. Without the recognition of ourselves and each other, without my acceptance as a priest, of other priests, of laity, of other laity, of monks and nuns, of their brothers and sisters in East and West, no restoration of communion will be possible, since it will not live in true ecclesial reality. While much has changed between Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism since my parents' marriage in 1951, much more should be expected. The fact that couples from East and West, on the basis of their common baptism, currently share the sacrament of marriage should speak to a shared, underlying ecclesial reality which compels the sharing of other mysteries as well. Nevertheless, although marriage is described as a foremost pastoral concern, and at least 20 years of dialogue has taken place just on this subject alone, little has been done to take concrete actions based on the agreed statements, and if nothing else, certain problems emphasizing division continue to be affirmed regarding the pastoral care of families, children, and human fragility reflected in divorce. I pray for the day that we might truly address each other as one in Christ, and with God's help overcome the works of Satan in this world that divide us from one another, and that the whole notion of a mixed marriage might be regarded as a relic of history rather than a present reality. And I might add that when I first learned that I was the product of a mismarriage, I was insulted, frankly insulted. Perhaps we would all be better to keep in mind the words of Pope Francis. Walk together, pray together, work together on the many things that we can do together, help each other. Thank you very much.
Each